What's up everybody, Super Duper fan here for another car review. This is of course the 2006 Nissan 350Z. Huge thanks to Harrison Auto Sales for hooking me up with this car to review for you guys today. So I'm finally reviewing a 350Z. So many of you guys have been requesting this car as well. So glad to finally be able to review one for you. Now this is the 2006 model, which has some slight revisions. This was kind of like the second generation of the 350Z. And so it has the restyled headlights, slightly different bumper, wheels are a little bit different, but it still looks really good, even being a 2006 model. I always love the curves of these cars, you know, with the sloping roof line, and then you have the rear quarter panels there that have the bulges, and it looks really good. I feel like the back end, though, is starting to look a little bit dated, not as cool looking as it did back in 2006, but still a very beautiful car for sure. Right, so for the interior of the 350Z, it's not quite as bad as everyone seems to make it out to be. So a lot of people like criticizing the interiors on these cars, but first things first, getting into this car, you know, it has a pretty good solid door, and I like that, but you can already tell the door handles, obviously right around where you constantly put your hand, that gets chipped very easily. And this car, even though it has a miraculously low 16,000 miles on it, that's all chipped up, and they've tried to touch that up, and it's even on the passenger side, and some of the other plastics here that have that painted black look to them, they also are all chipping. So that's something that isn't very desirable, and this one with low miles already has it pretty badly. I feel like if you had one with higher miles, it'd be even worse. But, so, you sit down in this car, though, and these seats are spectacular. I am really blown away by these seats. So just a little bit of wiggle room, but it really holds you nice and snug, especially the thigh support is great. So, you know, it's just a really nice place to sit, and it's, you know, similar to the 370Z that I was talking about a couple weeks ago, where the driving position is such that you're leaning back a little bit, and it's a cool driving position. Next, though, is the steering wheel in this car, which is really great. So, I mean, it's nothing spectacular, but I do like the design. It's nice. It's a thinner wheel, but I mean, like I said, not too bad. 10 and 2 grip is pretty good. 9 and 3 grip is great. Nice leather wrapped, and I like it. No complaints really. Next is the gauges, which are also pretty simple, but they get the job done. They look good. You have the talk right in the middle there with a shift light, which is cool. You have the 160 mile per hour speedometer, and your odometer's in there as well. You also have some auxiliary gauges up here. There's a time, you know, clock, and then there's also oil and voltage gauges there. So nice little array of gauges. I like the way those are angled towards the driver. It's pretty cool. Coming along to the center of the dashboard here. So this car is the touring model, but it doesn't have navigation. So where there would be navigation, you just get a big cubby, which doesn't, I mean, the lid feels pretty cheap for nitpicking here, but there's a good amount of space in there. And while we're talking about cubby space, though, I'll just talk about that before I talk about the climate controls and stuff, because the cubbies, there's cubbies everywhere in this car. So I think it's because the trunk space, which I'll mention because there's not much to mention, trunk space in this car is pretty minimal. You have this rear strut tower brace that kind of is stylistic but gets in the way. Makes it a lot harder to put a suitcase or things like that in there. Can't really fit a whole lot in there, especially with the sloping roof line. But they said, hey, let's make up for it by giving this car lots of cubbies. So let's start with the cubbies here. So you have some cubbies here in the doors. You have a cup holder in the door, which is nice. You have a little cubby here right where your seat controls are, which is an interesting place for a cubby. And then this car also has an additional cubby because there's an aftermarket radio in it. But other cubbies in this car, well, you have what appears to be an attempt at cup holders, but they're square shaped, and I don't know, they're kind of small, so I don't think you'd fit a cup in there very well, but that's those are cup holders apparently. Then you have this center cubby back here, pretty standard. A lot of cars have these where you know, have an armrest as well. It's not very deep, but you can fit some good stuff in there. So those are the normal cubby positions that most cars have. But then things start getting weird. There's because this car has no glove box, another little quirk. There's this little tray here where you can put some change, I'm assuming, and it's very tiny, but then they're like, since there's no back seat in this car, hey, let's put a bunch of cubbies in the back. So that's what they did. So behind each seat you have these little cubbies here, which are pretty good size. You can fit, I don't know, CDs or whatever in there. And then where instead of having the glove box, there's a large cubby behind each of the seats here. And that's a good size. Obviously, this person, the previous owner of this car, decided to put a subwoofer behind the driver's seat, so that cubby is no longer there. Just An interestingly designed interior, definitely different for sure. But they're very thoughtful about it because the materials aren't great. But I mean, this is 2006. I can't really compare it to modern standards. But stuff's hard, but they've thought it through. And, you know, one place where, you know, around the transmission tunnel, most people don't put any padding there, but you always rest your knee on that, and that could be really uncomfortable. This car has a nice little soft vinyl or leather pad here so that your knee doesn't get beat up whenever you're driving long distances and when rested on there. But so coming back to the center of the dashboard here, you have this aftermarket radio. This is a Kenwood head unit, but the stock head unit is pretty terrible, to be perfectly honest. So I don't blame them for wanting to swap it out. But it's a double din spacer, so you can put a nice touchscreen in here or something if you're looking at buying one of these. Climate controls down here, fine, you know, decent feedback. Nothing to write home about, but nothing to complain about either. All right, so let's take it for a drive and see how it does. 2006, still had a basic key, so you just put it in the slot, fire it up. So the only modifications this car has is it has some kind of aftermarket intake, and then the exhaust is aftermarket. I don't see any branding, so I'm not sure what brands they are, but it sounds pretty good. I'll give it a few revs here. Pretty sweet. Alright, so setting off in the 2006 Nissan 350Z. So the first thing you notice about this car is that the clutch is a little bit tricky, just with the way it catches and stuff. It's just takes a very delicate foot to, you know, get away smoothly in it. So while we're on this park road here, you know, it's a little bit bumpy and stuff. It gives me a good feeling for how this car soaks up bumps. It's not bad. I mean, it's firm, but you know, this is also, since this is the touring model, it's not quite as rough. I've heard the track model is a little bit rougher and not quite as nice, but this one, it's a pretty nice and comfy ride for the most part. I mean, yeah, it's a sports car and you're not going to forget it, but it's not bad for sure. Another thing is visibility in this car, which is you know, on the limited side, I'd say. So you know, windshield is actually really good, and the dashboard drops down low, so you have a really good view forward, but that's where the good visibility ends. The windows are pretty small, you know, they're just these little slivers here on the side. I mean, you can see out of them fine, but also this car has some pretty wicked blind spots. You know, it has these little quarter windows, but the way the seat is positioned, you normally can't see it on the passenger side. Driver side doesn't really do much either. So it kind of hard with the blind spots there, kind of tricky to drive around, you know, on making lane changes and stuff. You're always doubting a little bit. The rear visibility is also very thin, like the 370Z I reviewed recently. I mentioned the same thing. It's the same deal. Sloping roofline, that's par for the course. So it's a little tricky, you know, you don't have a ton of visibility there, but it's not super bad. Just cruising along here though, so far the road noise and everything is pretty quiet. That was one of my big complaints about the 370Z, was the road noise was the worst I had ever experienced ever doing reviews. This is quieter, and I don't hear everything those rear wheels are doing like I did in the 370Z. So it's pretty quiet and refined for the most part. Pretty impressed. Alright, so let's turn onto this back road here and see how it does. Nice. Whew. So that was fun. Okay, so this motor's really torquey, which is a little bit of a surprise. It only has 260 foot-pounds of torque, but it feels like more than that for sure. For the 2006 model year, though, they revised this engine, and it also has a little more power. So now it's doing 300 horsepower. So that's a healthy amount for a car that weighs, you know, 3,300 pounds, and it really helps this car to move well. And like I said, this engine is just so rev-happy and willing to just fly, and it's really great. 3.5 liter V6. But while we're on these back roads here, other observations. Well, the first is that the steering weight is just about perfect. Hydraulically, you know, assisted of course, good old school rack here, and it's just a really great feeling. It's just heavy enough to feel substantial, but not too heavy. It doesn't feel artificial or anything. It's really nice. This is just a fun car to drive on these roads for sure. So anyway, coming up to this tight corner I always take, and let's see how the body roll is. good. It's actually really planted. I'm pleasantly surprised. I did not think this car would handle this well. I'm not sure why, because people are saying even back in 2006 this is the best car you could buy for the money. This was basically the BRZ before the BRZ ever existed. Let's see about this acceleration again, shall we? Throws me back in my seat. Got a second gear chirp. Wow. It's plenty fast. To be perfectly honest, it feels just as fast as the 370Z to me. Really a fun car. One thing though that I can gripe about just in my first few minutes of driving here is the second to third shift. This shifter isn't the most precise, and I actually drove this car for about 10 minutes before I started filming this, and I missed third gear already a couple of times. And so, you know, it keeps just going right into fifth instead of third. So third's a little tricky to find sometimes, but I'm sure after I drive this car for a while, I'll get used to that. But yeah, really pleasantly surprised. This car is really spectacular. So anyway, I'm going to drive this car around here for the rest of the afternoon, and I'll come back and give you some updated impressions. Alright, so I've been driving this car for a while now. It's been all afternoon, and I gotta tell you guys, I'm like really liking this car a lot. Like, I'm considering whether or not I actually need back seats, because I might buy one of these. Like, I actually like it that much. Everything in this car is so satisfying. Just everything about it. I don't know, it just fits me like a glove, and I'll try and explain some of the reasons why I enjoy it so much. First is this engine, which just loves to rev, and I love that. And it's just, there's power everywhere. It just, you know, you don't have to get to a certain RPM like in the BRZ. There's a torque dip and then you got power. There's power everywhere. The handling is spectacular. The balance of the car is actually really good, a lot better than I thought it would be. Everything is just so sharp, and it's just the right amount of sharp, because like the Civic Si was too sharp in some areas. This is just the right amount of everything. I love it. The throttle response is immediate. The brake feel is great. I mean, everything about this car, and even the shifter. I complained at the beginning of this review about this shifter not being very precise, but it only took me about 30 or 45 minutes before I started using this shifter perfectly, and I didn't miss gears anymore, and it just, I actually have grown to love it, and the positioning of it is perfect, and the positioning of everything in this car is perfect, and it's just, I don't know, it's just everything. I love the driving position. I love how the dashboard's low, so you're not peering over a dashboard. It's just, you have a really good view of the road. And I mean, like I said, the steering is spectacular. And even the visibility. Another thing I complained about at the beginning of the review, it's actually not bad. The more that I've been changing lanes on the highway and looking around and stuff, that rear quarter window actually is useful, and with how large the rear glass is, with how wide the, you know, you can see in the rearview mirror, you actually have really good visibility, and you don't have a blind spot. Another acceleration, because why not? It's just, it's so much fun. I actually think I prefer this over the 370Z, which I already really liked as well, but this car, I don't know. I need to find one of these in my price range. That's what I need to do, because this thing is just spectacular. And yeah, the looks are spectacular. Everything about this car really has impressed me. So yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, some of the interior materials aren't the best. Who cares? Everything that you touch is nice, and that's the stuff that matters. This car, they really, you can tell that every little detail of this car they thought about long and hard until they were able to, you know, really figure out what people wanted. And this is what people want. You know, no one complained about the 350Z being too slow, because it has 300 horsepower. It's 100 more than the BRZ, and I mean, yeah, it's heavier, 3,300 pounds, but you don't really feel the weight. That's another thing, is it's so sharp. I mean, yeah, if I push this around a really tight corner, it's not quite as sharp as the BRZ, but it's not bad. It's really good. And I don't know. I'm really at a loss for words, because the more I drive this car, the more I'm like, holy crap. One, I didn't expect it to be this good, and two, I want it. I want this car. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of at a loss for words here, really. It's one of the, this hasn't really happened. I drive a lot of sweet cars and I can appreciate them and I can recommend them, but this is one of the few that I actually am like, I want to own this car. Like, this is one that I could see myself living with every day and really loving. It's really a spectacularly engineered car. So yeah, that's really about it. I don't know, I can't really give it much higher praise than that. And like I said, all the gripes I had at the beginning when I started driving it, they've all gone away. They've all vanished. And, you know, I mean, obviously this car's got this exhaust, which is a tad loud for my taste. That's aftermarket though. But I mean, everything in this car is just really, really well thought out. Just, I adore it. I absolutely adore this car. So yeah, and by the way, this one is for sale at Harrison Auto Sales. If I don't buy it first, if you're interested in it, definitely go swing by the dealership or give them a call. There's a link in the description. You can find out all about it. This one, it only has, like I said, 16,000 miles, which is insane. And I think they want around 19,000 bucks for it. So not a bad price, but yeah, it's really a great car. Like I said, I know so many of you have been begging for me to review 350Z forever, and now I finally have reviewed one, and wow, I wish I had driven one of these before. This was the first time I've driven one for more than 2 minutes, and it's really, really won me over, guys. So if you're considering one of these, and you want rear-wheel drive, and you don't mind not having a back seat, definitely get one of these. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Take care.